August 1952 went down in the history of ufology as a month marked by a veritable wave of unidentified flying object sightings around the world, especially in the United States. Against the backdrop of this surge in UFO activity, when newspaper headlines built in their reports of flying saucers, and the military tried to calm the agitated public, a particularly noteworthy incident occurred. It was during this tense time that Suzanne E. Knight, a young mother and housewife from the town of Seat Pleasant, Maryland, witnessed the appearance of a strange flying craft in which, she claimed, an alien was present. Her encounter with the unknown happened at very close range, allowing her to observe many astonishing details. It was a typical hot summer evening. The stuffiness had not yet subsided, and the air was still. At about 9:30 p.m., Mrs. Knight, having finished her household chores, was in her kitchen, perhaps washing dishes or preparing for the next day. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a strange, peculiar sound, which she later described as a buzzing or humming. It was not loud, but persistent, and seemed to emanate from somewhere outside, directly opposite her kitchen window, which overlooked the backyard. At first, she didn't pay much attention to it. All sorts of sounds can be heard on a summer evening, but the buzzing repeated several times, seeming to grow louder and closer. Mrs. Knight, thinking it must be some large insect, like a June bug or a hornet, that had carelessly flown too close to the house, went to the window and looked out to see what was happening. What she saw made her freeze in astonishment and fear. Right before her eyes, against the darkening evening sky, was a brightly glowing object, rapidly approaching the ground at a rather steep angle, about 45 degrees. The woman's first thought was that it was a distressed aircraft, and a terrible disaster was about to happen right before her eyes. She instinctively braced herself for the worst, expecting to hear the roar of an explosion and see flames. However, instead, the object, before reaching the ground, performed an incredible maneuver. It abruptly changed its trajectory, leveled out, and hovered motionlessly in the air at a right angle to the ground, directly opposite her house. It was at a distance of about half a regular city block from Suzanne, which she estimated to be about 300 feet, approximately 90 meters, from the ground. It hung there, silent and mysterious, defying all known laws of aerodynamics. Mrs. Knight, still not recovered from the initial shock, carefully examined the strange craft. It seemed to her that the UFO's shape resembled the wingless fuselage of an airplane, smooth and streamlined, silver or metallic in color. Behind the craft, as it seemed to her in the first moments, there was a light smoke or vapor, which quickly dissipated, but then she realized it was more likely air distortion from heat or some optical phenomenon. The side of the object facing Mrs. Knight was not smooth, but consisted of a series of clearly defined square windows or portholes, which were brightly illuminated from within by a soft, warm yellow light. This light was so intense that it created a faint golden glow around the object. At the top of the craft, as well as on its front part, slightly to her left, a small but bright red light, resembling a navigation signal, was clearly flickering. On the underside of the UFO, Suzanne could make out something resembling retracted landing gear or some protruding structures. And there, on the lower surface, there was also a row of small square windows, which, like the upper ones, glowed brightly from within with the same intense yellow light. Looking at these lower windows, it seemed to Mrs. Knight that she could distinguish something like a row of seats inside, arranged in several rows, similar to theater seats or seats in a passenger cabin. This was a very strange observation, as one would expect an aircraft to have control instruments there, not an auditorium. Through the upper windows, which were located higher up, she could make out another detail of the interior furnishings. There, it seemed to her, was something resembling a row of cabinets or shelves, arranged at a slight angle to the wall, as if following the curve of the hull. These cabinets were also bathed in yellow light, and it was not possible to see them in detail. And then Suzanne Knight saw what shocked her most of all. There was a person in the craft, she later wrote in her detailed report for the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, an organization that collected and analyzed UFO reports. He was sitting perfectly still and looking straight ahead, that is, to my left, as an observer. I couldn't understand what he was staring at so intently. perhaps some instrument or something outside the ship. I expected to see many dials, levers, or other instruments in front of him, similar to the control panel in an ordinary airplane, but I didn't see anything like that. Everything was somehow empty and austere. She also said that because of the intense yellow glow emanating from within, everything inside the object appeared to be yellow, and even the person looked yellowish. The passenger of this mysterious ship, according to Mrs. Knight, was wearing a peculiar helmet that fitted snugly around his head. She could not make out his facial features, but the very fact of a human-like figure inside the craft was undeniable. Along his arm, from the shoulder towards the helmet, there was some dark line, or perhaps it was just a shadow cast by the internal lighting, she added, trying to be as precise as possible in her descriptions. After observing this unusual object and its mysterious passenger for a minute, perhaps a little longer, Mrs. Knight finally recovered from her stupor. Her first instinctive desire was to share what she had seen, to call someone for help, or simply to record this incredible fact. She rushed to the telephone in the hallway and, with trembling hands, began to dial the number of the local newspaper, hoping they would send a reporter or at least believe her. But, unfortunately, the phone line was busy, or she misdialed in her haste. She couldn't get through. Disappointed, but still resolute, she returned to the kitchen window. The object was still hovering motionlessly in the same spot, bathing the surroundings in its yellow light. But the person in the window was no longer visible. The figure had disappeared. I thought, perhaps he had moved somewhere to the upper part of the fuselage, or stepped away from the window deeper into the ship, she mused. Down below, in those windows where I saw the seats, I would have definitely noticed him if he had gone down there. At that very moment, as if on command, the bright yellow light on the object abruptly went out, and immediately, the craft underwent a new, even more surprising transformation. From silver and luminous, it instantly turned bright red, almost fiery, like a red-hot door of an old cast-iron stove. She vividly described the change. Simultaneously, the ship began to sway slowly from side to side, like a pendulum. And at that moment, the witness was suddenly hit by a palpable wave of heat, very similar to that emanating from a hot electric toaster if you hold your hand close to it. This sensation was so real that she involuntarily recoiled from the window. Frightened by this new development, Mrs. Knight ran through the house looking for her sister, who was visiting her that evening. She desperately wanted someone else to see this mysterious ship and confirm that she wasn't going crazy. But while she was running through the rooms, calling her sister, and trying to explain what was happening, precious time was lost. When they returned to the kitchen together, the object was already gone. It had disappeared as suddenly and silently as it had appeared, leaving no trace behind except for the agitation and bewilderment in Suzanne Knight's soul. Overall, this entire incredible incident lasted, by her estimation, about 3 minutes. For about 2 of those minutes, Suzanne clearly and continuously observed the UFO and its passenger. Later, having calmed down a bit, she did tell her sister about the strange flying craft she had seen. However, Mrs. Knight decided to remain silent about the most important part, the strange aeronaut inside the ship. She was afraid her sister simply wouldn't believe her and would consider her a fantasist or crazy. And her fears, unfortunately, were partly justified. Her sister did not show much interest in the story and expressed a very skeptical view of the whole event, suggesting it might have been some rare atmospheric phenomenon or just a figment of her imagination. After such a reaction, Suzanne decided not to bring up the subject again and stopped talking about UFOs with anyone. Only several years later, when the excitement around flying saucers had subsided a bit, and she herself felt more confident, did she decide to tell her husband and grown children about the object she had seen and its mysterious pilot. Her story, full of amazing details, remained one of the many unsolved testimonies of that August wave of UFO sightings in 1952.